Good evening. This is the July 14th, 2011 meeting of the Athens City Shade Tree Commission. The first item on the agenda is tree permit and right-of-way issues. We don't have any specific ones at the moment in hand. We do need to be thinking about our fall planting list. I'll come back to that when we discuss Ron Lucas's report, because he's got some ideas about how we can deal with that particular issue there. So, as we've got people waiting to present us with their plans, I think we should move on and deal with landscape ordinance issues. The first one on the list is East Union Street apartments. John, I'm not sure how you want to handle this. Do you want to introduce it, or do you want to...
I can just state that Mr. Farian has gone through City Council and received a approval for a PUD to put in two buildings at one on East Union, one would be on Mill Iron, be east of Stewart Street, and I think the first building is a 12-unit, 30-bed complex. The other one is a 24-unit, 54-bed complex. And I do believe you have seen some site plans or have them there in front of you.
We have a site plan that was given to us, I think, when we were thinking of this in terms of Title 41 and just moving it through that way.
Okay.
Coming under a PUD, we have a similar role, but it's a little bit extended now.
Okay, well, I can go ahead and let Mr. Farian speak to what he's proposing and go from there.
Okay.
I guess I'm not really familiar. Tony Farian, 8800 Lavelle Road. You don't have an updated copy of the site plan?
I've got the one that shows two buildings on it, but it shows minimal utilities, which is one of the things that we need to see when we're dealing with a PUD, because we need...
John probably has an updated copy.
Minimal what? Is this the one you guys have?
Ours is dated May 12th, 2011.
That is the most recent one.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so you have it.
Okay. So this is the most...
Should have all the utilities on it.
Yes. Maybe.
Well, mine do.
Okay. Good. Good. Because one of the things that happens with a PUD, as I understand it, is that we have to look also at how the subdivision regulations are being met in that context. And so things like sidewalks, the way the sidewalks are landscaped, the way the lighting is dealt with, the way the open space requirements are met in this, is one of the things that was given to the Tree Commission to do when we get into one of these, I believe. But I'll look to John for some guidance on that.
Well, we can go over each and every one of those issues. I can tell you this, that there will be more extensive drawings submitted to us at the time of the building permit application, which will show more detail in regards to the actual engineered drawings of utilities and such. But this here has the basis of where everything is at. I don't know how well you can see it on the prints you have, but the project does have sidewalks along the front, and I do know that...
Which side are we calling the front? Is that
well, that's a good question. I've been saying Mill Iron, but I don't know what you're calling the front. Each building has got its own front. So,
Yeah, it's got its own front.
So I should say it has sidewalks on both sides.
Yeah.
Both fronts will have sidewalks. And they have sidewalks then coming up to the front entrances on both buildings off of both streets. And the rest of it, as you can see, is behind it, in the areas between the two buildings, is primarily parking, with parking underneath the building as well, because the buildings have to be elevated for flood requirements. So he's able to compensate a lot of his parking underneath. Lighting wise, there will be lighting on the buildings that will be pointing into the parking lot. That's kind of required by code through the state of Ohio building code. And we have discussed, and I think through the planning commission, we discussed that you were going to maybe put some on that strip there between the two parking lots, or did you feel the building? I can't remember what the
I think the question became, when we talked about that, was too much lighting. If you remember correctly, we We did talk about that. Now, the underneath of the buildings, and then the outside of the building will have lights on it. And then I think one of the planning commission members brought up the point where there's actually, how did they say? There's actually, you can have too much lighting, which is the first time I've ever heard that. So I think that was where they kind of brought it back to John and me to take a look at the overall lighting of the building.
Within the city code, we've got requirements to avoid sky shine, basically.
Right.
We
Yeah,
don't want
and that would
lights
not be
pointing
the
upwards.
case.
We don't want intense reflected light going upwards either.
The lights are underneath in the parking areas underneath the building, and then there would obviously be some
Yeah.
lights by code requirements at the entrances and exits that would be pointing out, so.
And you're aware of the code requirements on those light fixtures?
Yeah.
Okay, good. One of the things that I think we need to make clear, you say there's going to be revised plans coming in. This site, by my calculation, requires 25 large shade trees. I don't think the Commission are going to want any surprises coming in saying, oh, we can't manage 25 large shade trees because whatever. If we haven't got complete plans now, I don't think we want to approve them.
This is the time you do want to approve. You want to approve where the trees and the placement that he's presented are at, and they will then, with your approval, then when he brings the drawings into me, I will then verify that all the trees are on there as was approved at this meeting. That's what we do through the Planning Commission, the preliminary PUD, and there will be a final plat that then is reviewed and approved and everything when everything's done. You typically don't ask developers to go to that expense at this stage before all their approvals are done prior to.
Well, I expect to see a plan on which I can see 25 large shade trees or their equivalent, and I
believe this plan shows 25 large shade trees, if I'm not wrong.
But is that the same one that I've got in front of me? Because there isn't a list of species on here, or a way for me to indicate, to judge which one of these are large shade trees and which ones aren't.
That's fair enough.
So am I missing something on the drawings?
No.
Okay. Well, I think the way that I'm looking at my fellow commissioners for some support on this, and I think the only way we're going to approve it is with that proviso that there will be 25 large shade trees on this site and they have to be spaced 30 feet or more apart. Because, as I say, we can't see exactly where these trees are going to go on this site at the moment with the drawings that we've got.
Draw them on, Tony. See you next month.
No,
I think they are drawn on here. I guess what you're asking me for is the species.
Well,
we were going to, our plan, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, we're to build this exactly the way it's shown. Exactly the way it's shown. The amount of trees that are on here are going to go in exactly where they're placed on these site plans. If you're looking for species, you're right, I did not indicate what species were on here.
Well, it doesn't have to be species. It could be just the fact that it's going to be a large shade tree qualified by the fact understand the large shade tree is so many feet high and certain sort of spread. But when we look at a plan like this and we see different sized circles representing trees, we assume the big ones are the large ones. The smaller ones maybe medium, and then the smallest ones will be small shade trees. And so if we go through counting like that, then we don't get the 25 that I think that the site requires. That if you're telling me that those circles represent large shade trees, then maybe
we're good, huh?
maybe we're good to go. But that's the concern I've got, because, as I say, we've been bitten in the past by people coming back to us and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, there's a sewer guy underneath this piece. We can't put these trees where we thought they were going to be put, and we haven't got what we really want out of the landscape requirements." And so that's the concern that I've got when I look at this, and we discover that there are major changes going on.
Okay.
So
I can.
Yeah, the way it's drawn, it looks like there are decorative trees. Small. The way it's drawn, it looks like there are small decorative trees in between parking lots. It just, if you follow the pattern of the way plans are submitted, that's what they look like.
Yeah, I would agree. We just don't know which ones are intended to be the primary or the shade trees, and which ones might be smaller ornamentals.
Just lack of information.
The only thing we can do is go by the size of the circle, and it would suggest that there are not sufficient large shade trees, but there are a lot of, there's a number of trees, maybe 30 trees on there, but, which ones are really truly the shade trees? And, for instance, there's a cluster between the buildings there, which is probably too close together, although I'm not sure, so those probably aren't large shade trees, although they're the middle-sized tree circle.
Sure. Do you guys have any recommendations for, I think, John, you were the one telling me that there's, if you have 2 medium trees, that equals 1 tree, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, and we do trade-offs like that. We
Right,
clearly
and then-
prefer large ones, but where there are constraints because of high voltage cables, or maybe your proximity to a building, then we can compromise in that sense. But then, of course, you're looking at more trees in total being planted.
And then, if I'm not wrong, then it was 3 bushes equal each tree?
No. 3 small trees. Small trees are typically 15 feet to 20 feet size trees. Mediums are, I think, 20 to 40, and things over 40 are considered large shade trees. I'd have to look at our actual list. We can give you a list of the small, medium, and large trees.
That would be
we've got.
great. That's why I was just getting ready to ask you that.
Yep. No, we have a list, and you
Because
can
I know
pick from
on
that.
the previous 2 buildings I built, you recommended Freeman maples.
As
autumn
more
maples.
possibilities. Yeah, we don't like to see too many put in one place, and so a little bit of variety is good, but they are a good shade tree, quick growing. There are some oaks, though, that are very good.
And you have that list today with you?
I don't have it with me, but I can email it to you, or I'll send it to John, and he will get it to you,
Okay.
and so we can do that. What other questions have the commission members got?
I wondered if your plan is detailed enough and accurate scale so you can figure out whether the spacing is correct between all the trees.
If each one of those small circles represented a large shade tree, then yes, there are enough circles on there with the correct spacing, because usually I can see in the parking lot, for instance, there 3 parking lot spaces apart, and 3 parking lot spaces apart is roughly 30 feet. So that to me would mean enough to do that. And the position of those trees will be good if they could be large shade trees. There is a requirement in the Title 37 that they be put in a space that has a minimum dimension of 8 feet as its smallest dimension. So we'd have to look at the width of that. Although it looks like it could be 8 foot wide, that gap that's between the 2 parking lots
Just
on
to
there.
keep cars from encroaching on the trees.
And to give the trees enough space to grow, and for the rain to water them and so on. You see the piece I'm talking about, there's the 2 long strips in the centre of the plot, and
I only have 1 long strip in the middle of the
sorry,
plot.
well, there are 2 parking lots strips, and then between them there's 1 planting strip.
That's correct.
And is that planting strip 8 feet wide?
Yes, sir.
Good. It meets the requirements then.
How many trees did you designate were necessary on this lot?
25 large shade trees.
So basically, because I just counted 25 large trees myself and didn't even count the small ones.
Okay.
So basically, if I made these a little bit bigger for you,
Well, if you get
apparently the architect made different sizes, and I think that's just the way he was doing that.
I
I could just label each one of these trees an autumn maple, and we'd be done.
probably.
Can I do it right now and say,
Oh, wait, no.
these
no.
are all autumn maples?
What we're saying is, we can approve this plan if you're going to plant 25 large shade trees. I think there's space on that site for 25 large shade trees. I just think the drawing is a little bit,
It's the scale.
it's lacking in a legend that would actually tell us what those trees
I
are.
agree with the lacking of legend part.
And, you know, as long as the
But
commission...
A scale is a scale. I'm not trying to argue, I'm just
Well,
saying.
but it's not the scale for us. I mean, you could do, as David had said, measure a parking space and know that that is approximately 20 by 10 feet, and then use that. I mean, to say it's 1/16 of an inch equals a foot is not the case on this sheet of paper. And so we really don't have a scale. But again, you know, David has reconciled that a little bit by saying, you know, those spaces are probably 10 feet wide.
They didn't get a set of these plans?
I'll discuss that with them here when we're done.
Because I thought that was the 7 plans that I turned in. One of those plans was supposed to be turned into you back on May the 15th, if I'm not wrong. I'm just trying to move this thing forward. If I got to come back another month from nothing that I have done, because we're ready to start.
We've seen that.
And it's nothing that I personally have done. I've done everything I'm supposed to do. I've turned in and submitted these plans as required by the PUD and the city. Paid my fees and done everything. And I'm here today to try to move this forward.
Yeah, and I think we can move it forward.
Okay,
Well,
well,
I'm trying to explain to you why we've got concerns, to try and avoid these happening in the future, and to make it clear that 25 trees is what this site requires, and because it's a PUD, we had to go through some of these other things as well. And I don't remember being told that this was to be a PUD. It should have been obvious when I thought about it afterwards, when I was reading about the fact that council had passed it as a PUD.
and I'm counting like 35 trees on this thing.
Good.
But if I'm only required 25,
Yes, but remember, these trees have, to count as large shade trees, they have to be 30 feet apart.
Right.
And you've got a cluster of 4 trees over on the west side.
I see that.
which don't
I
look
see
as if
exactly
they're
what you're talking about
30 feet
there.
apart.
Those would measure approximately 15 feet apart. The 4 clustered together. And then the
40 feet there, there's 40 feet from
Well-
point to point, if you're looking at a parking lot. So if we're looking at the, as you say, you're talking about this section right here.
There's a cluster of 4, yes, over on that side.
If there's 40 feet there, and there's one on each point, I don't know how there's not 30 feet. I mean,
Well, it's
your
just...
scale's a little different than mine, I see that, and it looks much smaller on your plans, but if I scaled that with a ruler, I guarantee they're 30 feet apart.
Okay, good. So on your drawing, which I believe is 16th
No,
to
it doesn't measure
a
that.
16th to a foot, you should be measuring,
Those are the parking space. If you
what,
measure
30
these 2
16,
trees,
almost 2 inches
they're
then.
15 feet. It's about 15 feet.
Between
Yeah, it
those.
looks like 2 inches to me.
Okay, good. I mean, as I say, on the one we've got, we certainly couldn't make that judgment. But if they are 30 feet apart, they count. I don't have any problems with that.
Now, I might agree with the 2 on the left side of that, they aren't,
They're about 15 feet
totally
apart.
agree with that one.
Oh, okay.
But I could totally eliminate those trees and still come in under the 25, over the 25 trees.
Good.
See, I get maybe 26 feet.
I'm just trying to understand. I guess I got completely thrown a curveball here when I walked in. I kind of thought we were in good shape.
I don't think anybody's saying you're not. There just is lack of information
Yeah.
for us to be able to see
And
that.
what we're trying to do is make sure we've got a record of the fact that you've agreed there are going to be updates on these plans, and that isn't unusual, but that those plans have got to be consistent with having 25 large shade trees on it. And I think as long as we get that, we're good to go.
Fair enough.
But that is one of the shortcomings we're faced at the moment, that's all.
I will apologize, but I guess that would be part of my shortcoming on assuming that, based on conversations with John and the Planning Commission, that we were okay here. So I apologize if I'm a little bit poignant. How's that?
In terms of screening of dumpsters and trash areas, again, there isn't enough detail with this drawing to really judge that. John, have you seen?
Well, the trash area the city is showing there, I've requested through the planning commission that they be moved up so that they're not in front of the buildings. That would be taking 2 parking spaces out. On the bigger building, the smaller building, it's off to the side and it's adequate there. In both instances, as you can see, it's very difficult there, but there is screening around it as far as the some sort of screening or fencing. And then there would be the one large tree or two or three small ones, however you decide to do it, in front of each one of those. So it is shown, and it is there that they are.
We prefer green screen, green as well as hard fencing with these things, because long term the fences will fail, and the green can take over as the thing.
I guess once again, do you guys not see the same plans I'm seeing with the trees in front of
It's hard to do with
I
this.
mean, here's the fence, and here's the trees in front of them.
Where's the fence?
Right here. I guess you don't know that, do you?
I'm looking at that. That's the problem.
Yeah, and there's trees for screening.
Okay, good. So that's.
But I think what
That's
John
what
was
I meant.
saying was that there may be a possibility that these may be moved back here.
No,
When we were at planning,
just one more spot, Tony, so that they're not out in front of the
and
building.
that was one of the conditions.
Right.
We had
Through the
5
planning commission.
conditions that we had to meet per John, John's approval at the planning commission that weren't on these plans. And that was one of the actual conditions that was talked about. But there is screening. I mean, tree.
You see, when you're counting trees for screening, you often put in evergreens. They don't grow very high, so we don't count those as shade trees. And so this gets back to our problem of not knowing what's actually
No, I
being,
totally agree with you there.
what's being planted.
I guess I never had a list.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think we got a list from on that last building, didn't we? And we just built it in. If I'm correct about that, somebody gave us a list and we followed that list.
Yeah.
We often are happy to make suggestions if that will help you.
Yeah,
That would be great.
yeah, quite well.
I just, I guess some of the scaling problems, because I'm well over the amount of trees that are required here.
Good.
I just apparently don't have a legend.
I'd like to make one more comment.
Yes, ma'am.
We love those Freeman maples.
Yeah, that's what
But-
it was, free maples, yeah.
But if you get too many of one thing in one spot, if something comes through like the emerald ash borer, it will take them all out. So there are many, that among other reasons, it's better to have some variety.
Yeah, so
And there are other good trees too that could be used there.
Yeah, and like I'm saying, I'm going off previous buildings that we built, and those were your recommendations on those buildings. So that's why I put those
Well,
in.
I think it would be fine to have some of the trees autumn, the Freeman maple.
yeah, do.
Those are the
It's
same
not-
tree, aren't they? I found that out later on. An autumn maple and a Freeman maple is the same tree?
No.
Autumn glory, maybe.
Well, when I went to get them on the second job that we did, that you guys approved, the guy was like, they're the same tree.
I don't think so. I think
I don't want to say his name on TV or anything.
one's Asa Free Manning idea.
He was actually recommending you guys to buy the trees from. I was going by all your recommendations, even the guy to buy them off of.
Just going back for a moment to the screening requirements for trash areas, it does say that trash and garbage collection areas for commercial, multifamily, residential, industrial uses shall be enclosed on at least 3 sides by shrubs and a solid wall, or by a fence, a shrubbery fence 1 foot higher than the highest refuse container in the collection area. So that's where we're coming from when we look at this, and that's why we don't see the detail that perhaps you have in mind, but that's what we're looking for to come into compliance with.
I'm sorry, could you read that one more time?
We'll send you a copy of it, but it says that trash and garbage collection areas shall be enclosed on at least 3 sides by shrubs and a solid wall, or by a fence and a shrubbery fence 1 foot higher than the highest refuse container in the collection area. It's
So what you need to do is just put some shrubs or could be pine trees in front of the fence you already have. just along the front edge of those right there, you'd be okay.
So instead of, let's just say, a Freeman maple, you'd want a pine tree there.
Yeah, junipers, there's a range of evergreens that are suitable for these
You're
sort
probably
of
going to have
areas.
room for both, Tony, because you're going to have to pull that back 10 feet anyways. So, to meet the condition of where it goes.
But the evergreens that would be the right size to screen it do not count as shade trees.
Right. That's why I say he'll have room for both.
Yeah.
He can have the large tree in front, and then behind that, have the small evergreens screening the fence where the trash is going to be.
Then going on to the other buffering requirements, I don't think this site really is going to need additional buffering in the sense that,
Well, with what we've discussed. It's
Yeah.
all R3 surrounding it.
yeah.
Yeah, that whole west side over there is completely full of trees.
Yeah. I mean, there is an existing buffer. I don't think, we were disappointed, by the way, that you weren't able to keep some of your trees. But,
I'll be putting more in than I've taken out, though.
yes, but as I said to your man this morning, the trees that he was taking down are going to be taller today than the trees you plant will be when that building you're building. You've got trees on that site that are 30 to 50 years old. I'd like to see your building be there for that long, but with modern building practice, I don't think that that's going to be the case. And this is the thing that we really don't like about many of these developments, that we're losing substantial trees when this happens. And it's significant tree cover for the next at least 10 to 15 years before those trees that you plant become of a significant size.
I don't disagree with you there either.
Yeah. So, whatever we can do to keep large trees, we try and do. Anyway, are there any other questions from the Commission?
And we have a commitment to 25 shade trees to be
Large
planted.
shade trees.
Large shade trees to be planted 30 feet apart. A list of species is going to be sent by David to John. And you will mix them up a bit so we don't have all one kind of tree.
Thank you. That'd be great.
So are we happy then to approve this? Let it go forward?
Yes, but
Yes.
will we see a final plan that shows what species and which ones are the 25 large shade trees?
Well, the requirement is that they file their plan with the
Okay.
code office when it's finished. You have to complete all the hardscaping before if there's any hardscaping involved in terms of landscape arrangements, you have to do that before the building's occupied. But you do have 2 years or 2 planting seasons to complete the planting that goes in there. So you're not obliged to have all the trees in there on day one when the.
I actually like them, man. I think it makes the buildings
Yeah,
look better.
but we
I mean,
understand that.
if you saw the other 2 buildings, we
Yeah.
hardscaped all that, and it probably exceeded anybody's expectations on both those buildings, as far as I was concerned, on what is normal or required. I thought we went above and beyond because I like landscaping. I think it looks good.
No, they are good. They're well landscaped. So I look forward to this one being built to a similar standard.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So if we can move on to the next item, which is, I've lost my agenda. 518 Richland Avenue, which I think, Mike Knoll, are you here to give us some details on that?
Okay.
Well, I know you don't have plans showing the species on it.
Well, yours is a much smaller.
It is a smaller one, and half the site's already
Yeah.
fully grown, mature trees. I think there are some areas we can put trees in. We also have some fun areas on the site behind the building where we want to create some semi-private garden areas or patio areas for the residents who are above the retail area. Some neat outcroppings of rock that's been there for 40, 50 years, and hopefully will stay there another 100 years at this point. I know there was some indication to us that it'd be nice to have a couple trees in front of the building And we'd like to probably, because of the height of the building there and the fact that cantilever's a little bit over the curved front wall of the retail, what we did at the hotel, at the Holiday Inn Express, was to use a green pillar oak, which doesn't branch out that much, but it does provide some green, and so we won't have a conflict with the building in that green there. And so what we've shown tentatively would be to use those in front of the building and then along the property over here.
Yeah. So
Our neighbors are a little bit encroached upon our land with their driveway, and so we're kind of restrained there, but I think we can get those in there.
would you be agreeable to moving one of these closer to the street?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the way that I think I and several of the other commissioners thought about this was that we can count that lot at the back there as having 6 large shade trees. We're not going to identify them, but certainly the equivalent of 6 large shade trees at the back
Actually,
there.
we have...
You have more than that, but again, we get back to this.
There's a couple oaks back there.
Yeah.
And that's just on the
Yeah.
lower area, which are volunteers from the mature trees up on the
Yeah.
upper
And you're
side.
keeping them all.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, there are a few I guess, damaged trees or diseased trees. We'll thin those out.
Yeah.
And this was the area I'm talking about, that we'll probably do a little bit of a kind of a patio landscape garden in this area here for the residents above, so they can have a place to sit in the shade there. 'Cause this whole area is canopied. Till probably about noon, coming over, and then south is this direction. Then.
By calculation, this requires 9 large shade trees, and so if the back area is going to be counted as 6, then 1, 2, and 3 is basically, because here it looked like, because of this area, you could only plant small trees at best over on that side, and so we were
That's
thinking...
why I was thinking of going with the pillar oak,
Well,
because
the pillar oaks would certainly work well here, I think, and if you had a third one there, that's fine.
right now we've got a pulper growing right here, and
Yeah.
it's pretty much taken over the driveway and our parking spaces
Yeah.
there, so with that. And then we're going to play around a little bit with our roofs. We've got a couple of green roofs that we're going to
Okay.
do some experimenting on above the roof areas of the balconies then. And we're going to see how they do, although I have some flat roofs, they can naturally grow green on them. If you don't clean it out.
Are there any other questions for this one?
Yeah, I had one. The tree you're talking about, I assume, is the green pillar pin oak?
Yes,
Okay,
that's right.
I think that's a good selection.
Okay. Yeah, it's, we've got 4 of them, I think, in front of the Holiday Inn Express, which we planted, 4 or 5 years ago. And seem to be doing well with that environment there.
Good.
Yeah, they look really nice.
That tree's gotten a good write-up.
Dumpster and trash area,
The trash area is here, which would have a masonry wall around it at this location. It's a direct shot into the parking lot with it, and of course we'll have a gate on the front of it also.
Okay.
Screen.
and you'll be able to plant some green evergreens around it.
Yeah, I think that shouldn't be an issue to put some evergreens around there.
Okay. The ordinance also requires buffering between adjacent properties. I'm not sure how you could ever do that, and the one way around it is to simply get a letter from the adjacent owners saying, we don't think we need a buffer.
Yeah.
And so as long as the adjacent owners are happy with that, then it doesn't need a
I'm pretty sure
buffer.
the one will agree with that, since his driveway is on my property.
Okay.
And I'll talk to the gentleman on the other
Okay.
side, then we've had a very good working rapport over the years.
Okay.
I think he'll enjoy seeing the site being cleaned up, which only improves the value of his property.
Okay, good. Any other questions? No, I think we can then approve this as it is. Okay. Any objections? No?
No objection.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay. So, we've got some informational items here. I doubt if John has got anything to update us on, but he may. Alvy and I visited the Taco Bell Leghorn site and have reported to John the shortcomings of those 2 sites. In particular, Taco Bell site on East State Street has got very little of the agreed landscape plan that's been implemented. The Leghorn site was a very difficult one. Tree Commission members might remember that this was one that was originally under the old landscape ordinance requirements that would have meant a large tree pit being in the parking lot. That was never implemented. My suggestion is that they simply be required to come under the new landscape ordinance requirements, which would require as many trees as the old one. It's just that it would permit them to leave the parking lot in the shape it's in at the moment. And so they'd have to plant some additional trees to come into compliance, basically the trees that should have been in the middle of the parking lot. But they can put them on the outer edges.
Well, they had those planters, right?
Yes, but they were minimal. They didn't actually go into the
There's asphalt underneath.
into the asphalt underneath, and so there wasn't enough volume there for trees to live. The original design of those pits had been objected to by the fire chief because he couldn't get his vehicles around what would have been originally planned, and so even
Makes sense.
what they did wasn't actually sufficient in area, never mind in the fact that the trees couldn't survive in what they'd done. So that's the status of things for those two. And then I also reported to John that we didn't have an updated plan yet from Southeast Beverage. This is the one that Emily, I think Lee and I visited a while ago. We did a tree count on the site. We came to an agreement as to how many existing trees there were. And they were then to come back with a plan for how they could meet the requirement. And we don't have any record of that being done, neither does John, I believe.
No, I do not have.
And so we're still waiting on that one. So that's just informational.
Question, how long do you wait for somebody to comply before we take, push and take
Well, because of the 2-year requirement for planting, we don't really push until after 2 planting seasons. Now, the current ordinance actually requires all the hardscape to be done. None of these would have to meet that requirement. In terms of both Taco Bell and the Leghorn site, there is a trail going back, a paper trail going back involving the previous code director and the law office, trying to get these people, particularly the Leghorns, it was Bennigan's, I think at the time,
Right.
to comply with the code. And we weren't the only part of the Athens City Code that they seemed to have a problem with in terms of compliance. And so, I guess John's just going to have to move that one towards the law director again because...
Well, I don't know about that, I don't know. I spoke to them briefly, and I think they might,
Okay.
keep in mind, it's new ownership.
Maybe the new owners understand these things better.
So something may happen there. On the other one, reserving judgment.
Yeah, but I mean, all we can do is sort of keep feeding John the information in an occasional basis.
Of course, if these developers are going to be required before they can occupy to have all the hard services done, but they still have a year, 2 years to be able to finish up the landscaping, would it not be appropriate to get some kind of retainer or some
bond?
kind
Or a bond?
Well, yeah, and if it doesn't happen, then we just go ahead and direct the city to purchase those trees with that money and do the installation.
That's an interesting...
We're not going to get into bonds. I took it out and we put the contractor registration in.
Okay.
For various reasons that I go on all night
however
about.
we do it, maybe, maybe it isn't a bond, maybe it's, just some cash up front or something, I don't know.
It's the same thing.
At the moment, it amounts to liens on property at the point where somebody sheds the property and it turns out there is this complication, they didn't do the planting.
Well, that came up with the Leghorns. I mean, this is like old stuff even when I came here. And we've been
Yes, and
talking
you're a
about this
young
for a long
whippersnapper.
time.
Yes. Yeah.
Still nothing's been, how many, still nothing.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's something that we need to try and deal with. I mean, it's, I think, very much the case that we have to rely on your office, John, to do your best with the resources you've got to
Thank you.
enforce the code as you can.
Or find a way to eliminate the 2 years. Why wait 2 years? I understand the appropriateness of planning it at the right time, but, you know, that's a part of scheduling and planning the development of the project.
Yeah.
And, you know, I understand too that if you have a small project and it's a small renovation or a small addition, it can happen pretty quickly. But some of these projects take probably a year, 9 months to a year, and hopefully you can figure out a way to get it within the plan, you know, set it up in such a way that the planning season matches up with, you know, and you can get those plantings in.
Okay.
And require that to be done before you occupy.
We should make a note of all this, because the next item we're going to be talking about buffer requirements, which may require a revision to the landscape ordinance, and so that would be our opportunity to revisit that issue of that 2 year or 2 seasons, or how it's phrased, requirement, because you know, it has caused problems. Certainly.
And there's a pattern here. It's the outside property developer franchise owner. It's a local person who has a local record, like Mr. Farian, and stake in the community, puts together a building and puts it together now with the landscaping, so it all looks good. But these other people don't quite have a stake in the community. Well, maybe that's a
gross generalization.
A gross generalization.
Seems to
Okay.
fit.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Anyway, that's certainly one thing to put on the agenda of possible changes for Title 37. So the final item under the landscape ordinance issues, we have a current requirement that is somewhat restrictive in terms of buffering. It requires that a buffer be present between all properties, basically. And John, I don't know if you want to run into what you see as the major difficulties for this.
It's just something to think about, and I've come across it quite a bit. It's been my idea that we eliminate the buffer requirements between uses within the same zone. Otherwise, as it is, if you have a hedgerow or a fence, as many times we have the parking lot coming up to the property line, so all that's left is room for is a fence between properties, and in the higher density areas, what we've noticed in our inspections and such, it just becomes, if it's a fence line, it becomes a graffiti issue and demolition. If it's a small planting space of 2 foot or a buffer of 2 foot between the property line and the pavement, and the other person has a 2 foot, you'll have a 4 foot area. It has a hedgerow or something in it. It could just be a row of yews or whatever. It typically becomes a trash collector. So they've become problems that, or the kids cut paths through them or whatever it may be. I'm very much in favor of something between uses, maybe in between an R1 and a business district, or R2 and a business, not necessarily between the same uses, but what that is, I guess I'm leaving up to you guys to think about what we do, because if it's fencing, it's a problem. If it's a narrow space, it's a problem. Because basically all it becomes is a row of mud between 2 curbs that has nothing but branches and weeds growing in it. It collects a lot of trash. So, you know, which way do we go with it?
One of the difficulties we had with Title 37 in its very old form was a requirement for an 8-foot buffer. Do you have any idea how wide a buffer you would require if there was to be a buffer? Or would you require a buffer set at a minimum width?
No, I mean, I'm saying, I guess, if you're saying you need 8 foot for the tree row or tree line, if you got 2 properties, and that's 4 foot on each side, if in due time, so then you've got 4 foot on each property, so then you have 8 foot between the 2 parking lots, and now you have room for the trees to be planted basically on the property line. That would go, I don't know how you count it or what you do, that would count for both sides. And in common zones, pretty much eliminate any sort of barrier buffer between the two. It could just be a visible buffer, be it, you know, grass or tree line or whatever it may be. But to prevent some sort of a catch-all is what I'm trying to do.
We don't really expect, I think, a tree line anymore along the buffer. It'd be nice, but
well, that's-
we hit so many problems with that older regulation in that we had to give so many variances that it clearly wasn't practical.
Had to get variances for parking. Is that-
Yes, we had to give way on that because of the parking.
As you know, there's been new rules written on that, the lot coverage rules, so that will maybe allow us to do some different things here.
Yeah.
In the R districts, now it's a maximum lot coverage of 60%, so,
And that would
That
cover
includes-
R3s as well as R1 and R2.
and that, I'm sorry?
And that covers R3 as well as...
R1, R2, and R3, that is correct. So that now provides 40% of green space in the residential zones, which will allow possibly this buffer zone between, properties to prohibit parking lots from going right up to the parking lot. I think Mr. Farian's is a perfect example between the two buildings with that 8-foot strip. If that was two separate lots, then there we are. We've got a nice tree line between two separate buildings. Where that may be, but again, I think it's something that needs to be discussed.
Oh, yeah.
With,
No, I think we...
not just me, but
Yeah. That was why we wanted to raise it here, so that members of the public, if they are watching and want to contribute, they should contact me or the Code Office or the City Planner, who was unable to come tonight, but we are holding discussions with him as well as to what he thinks about these ideas, because we've tried it one way, it didn't work. We've got a current version and we can see some problems with that, and so we'd like to see if we can come up with some better language and ways to make it all work better.
and we've seen problems for various reasons in backyards with the screening, fencing between properties during events that have become issues that, we're making, like the temporary fencing is not allowed anymore. Permanent fencing can create a problem as well, so, or barrier, whatever it may be, if it's a hedgerow or a screening or whatever it may be.
So, any other questions or comments on buffering from the commissioners? No? Okay, that's the end of the landscape ordinance issues. Ron Lucas was unable to be with us tonight. He's got 4 things on his list for us. He says the AUP franchise renewal is moving forward. They had another meeting on the 13th, which Alvy was able to get to. I don't know if you've got any comments to...
I have, let's see, we did have something come out of it, but I don't think that it's really a final thing because City Council really has the final say in all this. I can read the Section 4 if you wish, the parts that were the most important. The idea of keeping private property issue separate was important to AEP too, and a suggestion was made to make that at the top of Section 4 of the franchise with AEP, so that it reads, "It is understood by the City of Athens and the grantee, being AEP, that this agreement does not cover private property utility line clearance." And that was the first issue. And then the second paragraph that's AEP seems comfortable with at this point: all high voltage electric lines in the public rights of way and municipal parks should be kept clear of tree canopy in a reasonable manner. The grantee will provide a general list of areas that maintenance will occur and a specific list of trees that will be removed. Industry standards for tree care should be adhered to when performing tree maintenance on City of Athens-owned trees. These standards include ANSI A300 pruning standards and ANSI Z13 1333.1 2000. And then there are 2 suggested graphs below, and I think actually Ron Lucas's was the better one. I made a suggestion, but City Council might make their own choices. The grantee or the representative will make reasonable communication attempts to notify property owners, residents of maintenance and removal efforts prior to work commencing. A general time and date of the required work should also be communicated. And I suggested, and this may not be the best suggestion, the grantee or the representative will make a reasonable attempt to notify property owners, residents of maintenance and removal efforts prior to work commencing. A journal time and the required work should also be communicated. So that's a choice between those 2 paragraphs. And there may be something entirely different. The City of Athens acknowledges that there are times when emergency situations arise and electric service must be restored to ensure the safety of our citizens. The grantee takes direction from the ANSI in utility-declared emergencies. In the event of a utility-declared emergency, the ANSI A300 pruning standards state that all service must be restored as quickly as possible in accordance with, and a series of ANSI citations. At such times, it may be necessary because of safety and urgency to, I've lost the last paragraph, pardon me, to deviate from the use of proper pruning techniques as defined in this standard. Following the emergency, corrective pruning should be done as necessary. And that was something we copied from some other cities, that final paragraph. So that is now being reviewed by AEP's council, and again by our council, and then the city council will make the final.
And so it was a long meeting. Right now where we are is we have that draft of the tree section, and council probably will not be meeting in August, and so we don't have time to actually renew this or have this contract in place by the time the previous one expires. AEP is okay with that, and the city is probably okay. We're still checking with Pat to make sure that it's okay if we have a lapse of a couple months there.
Yeah.
So it'll give time to, if we do need to massage any of this out. There's also another separate issue that doesn't have to do with the trees that I'm examining as far as the contract. Two of the things, I mean, the big thing that changed was originally that they would provide a list of trees that would require maintenance each time they were in an area. Now it's a list of removals with notification of the area of town that's going to be worked on, which I think is somewhat reasonable, being that having a list of every single tree that's going to be cut would probably be rather difficult.
The only comment about on that is that there are times when we would prefer them simply to remove trees if they're going to be successively pruning them, because the tree eventually is going to die from that, and we'd be better off getting it out of there and then planting a more appropriate tree that's not going to require pruning. So that's the only complication that I see in changing the language the way it has been changed.
So that would be perhaps a good thing for Ron Lucas to make sure he's paying attention to. I would hope that when he gets an area, that he can go through and check the trees that are marked, and if there are any.
If there's some mark for pruning that he thinks should be removed,
so he can communicate that.
Yeah, that would be the way to handle that. But that is the concern I've got, because there's too many maples that have been planted under power lines that shouldn't be, and they should be just taken out and a suitable small tree planted in place of them.
Or they've pruned 50% of a tree.
And that's another issue is, in the draft we have, there's no remedy if they butcher a line of city trees and cause damage to city property. And so that's a big problem I have, but they did not seem open to having any written requirement for them to take corrective action. Perhaps just a general agreement that they would be responsible, but I can't speak for them. And that's an issue. I'm afraid that there would be no change from how it is now, to a large extent.
Well, that would be another argument for having a five-year agreement rather than a 10-year.
And it is a 5-year timeline.
Yeah, just to see how this works.
The other point, I just want to bring this up to the tree commission people because it was rather interesting. They follow ANSI standards, but not all of the elements in the standards they revealed at this meeting. And so that was kind of fascinating to me. The guidelines. They refer to them as guidelines, and mostly for cost measures. For example, what we have in here for following the emergency, corrective pruning should be done as necessary. They say they simply don't do that, and they will not do that based on cost, unless the city has a specific complaint about specific trees that were not pruned correctly during the emergency, which can happen. Then they may come back and try to correct some of that.
Again, another reason for having a 5-year agreement, to see how it works. Because I mean, this is a substantial improvement, I think, on what we've got now.
It absolutely is good to have, great to have this section.
Yeah.
And they brought several people to address it, so they're taking it seriously.
Okay, any other comments, questions about the AP agreement? Ron has three other things. He notes that Columbia Gas is beginning gas line replacement on the Near East side of the city. This will start, or has started perhaps, but it's planned to go over the summer. And that Columbia Gas have said that they will take responsibility for any tree damage, because what they are doing is putting the new lines under the trees, basically, in the right-of-way. They're not going to dig up the streets to replace the gas lines. They're going to use a horizontal drilling technique to put holes straight through people's water lines, sewer lines, and everything else, I imagine, if they're not careful.
We actually have a camera system that they're going to run through this line, so kind of interested to see how it
I mean,
works.
we have storm sewers in the Near East side that aren't that deep, and they certainly cross the right-of-way, so I don't know how they're going to cope with some of these things. But they have made this assurance that they're going to take responsibility for any damage that they do, so I think we have to take them at their word. Fall planting, I mentioned this earlier. We've had, we've picked up on a potential way of saving some money and planting a significant number of elms. There's a company that will provide sharp-top trees. They will match one for one any purchase of these Princeton American elms. Ron is looking into this on our behalf, and what we may do is purchase a group of these on the order of 20 would be the order. 10 will be purchased and 10 will be matched. The plan would not be to put all these in one place. They would be dispersed in suitable sites around the city, but this looks like a great opportunity to actually try and put back some other species that have certainly gone from the street tree inventory.
And the sharp-top trees will do the matching?
That's the way it works. In fact, private developers or people buying trees can buy these trees and then donate their match to a public entity. As I say, Ron's investigating that. We need to be coming up with sites for planting in the fall. I have a list of places where we've taken trees out and where we've promised people that we would try and put trees back in previous years, and we haven't managed to do that because we just run out of money. So, but if there's any particular projects that commissioners have got or that the public would like us to think about, then now is the time we're taking ideas. We need to get our order together. If we're not going to use this, we would have to order other trees instead for these sites. But as I say, Ron's looking into this one as a possibility. Ash tree inventory is complete, I'm told. The data will be input into the GIS an ash tree location map very soon. And so we should have a complete inventory. At that point we can then do what we promised the previous mayor and what we promised the current mayor, and that is that we'll come up with a report on the liability of the city should the emerald ash borer infect our trees. And from that, hopefully the city would then be able to develop a plan for what it should do with its trees. These are not trees that are on private property. They would be the responsibility of the property owners. But the tree commission has said for a long time that we need a plan for how we would cope with the emerald ash borer infection. And in order to do that, we need to know how many trees, how big they are, where they are, in order to come up with an estimate as to whether we can cope with this once it arrives, or whether we have to take preemptive action, which I don't think any of us particularly want to do. So, any questions on Ron's report? In general? No? Okay, good. You do that. I think that brings me to the end of my list. I have no other business.
I have one question. I have a number of developers that are asking at times, they'll come in and if they cannot meet the requirements, they kind of want an idea of how much it is per tree for the banking system. Is there a dollar amount that's ever been specified? or-
No. Ron Lucas would have to probably do that on behalf of the city.
Okay.
So I'd suggest that,
And then maybe that's I'll talk to Ron, maybe we'll put that in as an ordinance or a council number that gets changed. Legislation,
Who-
yeah.
Besides that.
yeah, because, I mean, one way of doing the banking is that the developer identifies an area of the city that we agree with them should be planted with trees, and we leave it up to them to plant it. The other way of doing it is that, yes, they put money into a kitty that then becomes available for the city to use.
I
to
think that's
plant.
the way a majority of them that have asked the question would prefer to do. If
Okay.
they're, like you said, from out of town, they'd rather just say, hey, here you go. You guys plant them where you feel it's necessary, because they don't know the best location.
So my reservation every time this comes up is that, well, I want to really see why it is you think you can't meet the
Right.
requirements, because I'm not prepared just to have an open investment scheme in terms of them putting money down, because what they're getting away with is not maintaining trees in the long term.
Most of the time, I would think it would be a high-density business area that's maybe already all blacktop, that just makes it nearly impossible for them to do.
Yeah, and certainly if we are open to revisions of Title 37, then that's something where we may want to look and see if we do want to come up with a dollar amount that can go in there.
Okay.
And also address the issue of long-term maintenance, because we don't want to pass a liability over to the city of trees each time
Right.
these people do this. Much as we love our trees, they need to be maintained. Okay, is there anything else before we consider the minutes of our May meeting? Nope. Okay. Well, we've got the minutes, and I have corrected it now, so it says, instead of agenda, it says minutes at the top. Slipped up on that. Are there any other corrections to the May 12th minutes? Okay.
I move they accept it as presented.
A second.
Okay. Are there any objections to passing the minutes of the May meeting? Hearing none, they're passed and we have minutes. Our next meeting is planned to be on August 11th. John, do you know if we will have any landscape plans that need?
You have one in August and one in September as of right now, in all likelihood.
Okay, so we are likely
Possibly more,
to, we
obviously.
are likely to meet then in August. So if you can keep that in mind, I'd appreciate it. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.